allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to the August 15th Board of Public Affairs. First on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the August 1st PPA. All been presented with that.
So moved. Second.
Bill?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Tom?
Yes.
Next to be a hearing of public concerns. Seeing none, we'll move on. Next on the agenda is the clerk treasurer's report.
The board's been presented with the clerk treasurer's report for the month ending July 31st, 2017.
I move we accept the clerk treasurer's report.
Second.
Karen?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is a resolution to modify the electric rate schedules and rider A power supply cost adjustment. This will be resolution number 17.
I've got a presentation in a few minutes.
Yes, sir.
Just to kind of review it here. In the meantime, I wanted to provide some updates after our meeting last, I guess 2 weeks ago, where we talked about the different options and perhaps where we might go with this. I think we have some good news to share with everybody tonight. Just kind of going back to why we're doing this again. We haven't adjusted rates since 2006. Power supply resources that are listed there, all different since 2006. And those new resources have greater demand and lesser energy costs. Another big driver was that the power supply cost adjustment had reached 2.79 cents per kilowatt hour. And that, of course, is skewing the cost of providing the service for those that are more efficient users, particularly your large industrial customers. And we also discussed as part of this process making sure that we have adequate funding for capital improvements, reinvesting in the system to be able to ensure reliable service in the future, and in the long term try to keep our rates lower by reinvesting rather than continuing to repair. Some of the rate plan goals we went over before: maintaining electric system integrity, financial integrity, allocating the costs fairly and equitably to all customers, keeping the rates overall revenue neutral, moving the rates toward the cost of providing service to the various customer classes, and incorporating more of the projected power supply cost. That means trying to minimize the PSCA by including those costs in the base rates. We wanted to minimize the financial impacts to customers by spreading those adjustments out over 3 years rather than one. Develop rates that send appropriate price signals to customers so that, if they're using it more efficiently, the cost they pay decreases, and that we remain competitive with area utilities. So just to take you back to the cost of service summary, I wanted to show this again. I mentioned it last time, but I thought perhaps maybe I should hit this a little bit more. What UFS, Utility Financial Solutions, did when they prepared this cost of service study is they projected the revenue requirement, how much money we need to collect on an annual basis to pay all of the O&M expenses, the debt service if you had it, capital improvements, and then they project that against what the rates that are in place now would produce. Well, you can see that the projected revenues here would be a little over $20 million, while the cost of providing the service is something less than that. So it's about 1.8% more under the current rates with that PSCA than what we need to recover to pay our bills here. So when we talk about some of these cost adjustments and trying to move things toward the cost of service, it's not as much that some are going up to pay the cost of others going down, we're recovering too much money in the first place here. And so we're able to accomplish those goals, and you'll see to do something, I think, favorable for all customer classes. The 3-year plan that we discussed, again, was overall revenue neutral, moving the rates toward the cost of providing service while minimizing those financial impacts. The major changes, as you recall, were an increase in the monthly customer charge to more accurately reflect the cost of providing that service, and the customer charges typically include all the meter reading, billing, and collection costs, those types of fixed costs every month that are impacted by it on a per customer basis. There is no change in the general service or large power demand charge. There is a decrease in the combined energy and power supply cost charge. And the thing that we want to make sure everyone understands is that when you look at just the published rate and don't include the power supply cost adjustment, it looks like the energy charge is increasing, okay? But you can't exclude the power supply cost adjustment as part of that energy cost. And you'll see here when we include that in there, the cost of energy is actually decreasing for customers. Okay, that's what I think a number of you have been hearing from some of the customers out there, is the concern regarding that PSCA. And so we're looking at trying to address that tonight. The security lighting rate has a recommended increase, but it's not a lot of money, as you'll see as well. But again, that was not recovering its cost of providing service. The rates include $2 million in annual capital improvements allocation, and as I mentioned before, it incorporates a greater projected power supply cost in the base rates themselves rather than the power supply cost adjustment. So when we look at the residential rates, and again, we're only asking you tonight to act on year 1 of the plan. The customer charge would go up by $2 for residential customer. And as I just mentioned, when you just take a look at the published rate, looks like the rate's going up from 8.5 cents to 9.98, 7.2 on the tail block to 9.98. But it doesn't include 2.79 cents of PCA. So if you roll that in here, here's what the effective rate is. It's going from 11.29 down to 9.98 cents. Okay? And the same way here. So we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. I understand that you had gotten some questions from customers, particularly residential customers, concerned that their bills were increasing. And we'll show 3 different typical customer bills for residential and what the impacts of the change will be. Same thing here with general service. Again, the customer charge is scheduled to increase, but when you take a look at the rate with the PSCA, where it is today compared to what the energy cost will be going forward, it's a decrease in that energy cost. And then finally, same thing with large power, increases in the customer charge, no change in the demand charge, but decreases in the effective rate for energy. Okay. Security lighting, as I mentioned, those costs are going up, but when you take a look at the total revenue there, you know, it's increasing from $41,490 to $42,320, and that's on approximately $20 million of electric system revenue. So it's not a significant hit, and for folks that have an LED security light, it's 10 cents a month. So not much change. So when we were here 2 weeks ago, we showed you this same chart or table. And what we were looking at that time was comparing current rates with that PSCA to the 3rd year of the plan. And remember, we were phasing these changes in over 3 years. But again, we're not asking you to take a look at the 3 years tonight. We're asking you to take a look at just the 1st year. So we modified that chart to show the change from current rates to the year 1 plan with a 0.5 cent per kilowatt hour power supply cost adjustment. So if we look back, you can see that there's more red, which indicates a decrease rather than an increase for customers. There's more of that in there, but we believe that we can start here with a 0 PSCA. And if we take a look at the chart with that, this is what we see. So for a typical residential customer, they're in the 750 kilowatt hour range, a decrease of $4.57 per month. And then you can see the differences with the different rate classes. And it's good to take a look at both the dollar amount and the percentages, because depending upon what the total bill is, the percentages may be higher or lower, and it means a lot of difference in the actual dollars.
Because I know, Kevin, if I may interrupt, in large power, of course, you and I have been kind of talking about this and working on it. We have a customer who uses 1 million plus kilowatt hours
Correct.
per month.
Correct.
That savings is going to be substantial.
Yes, that would be.
And I suspect it'll get better.
I think it will too.
Forward thinking on some things that we're working on.
And we'll share some information that I think will help support that. But, you know, it's not often that you're able to put together something that shows a decrease for, it looks like just about everybody here. I'm not suggesting that there couldn't be some outliers here that have big demands and low energy that wouldn't see some change as we move more of that cost into fixed cost and less into the variable or energy cost. But in general, these are typical customer bills for these different rate classes. And I think that will be a welcome relief to most of the customers of our system. Any questions on this? Now, we presented this projected power supply cost bar graph at the last meeting, and you'll see that what we were projecting between 2018 and 2021 was all-in average wholesale power supply costs of $74 to $76 per megawatt hour. That's 7.4 cents per kilowatt hour to 7.4 to 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour in terms that are more commonly used. So we have been evaluating the impact of the work that our folks are doing over at the power plant, the solar field, the Auglaize hydroelectric plant, and how that work impacts the cost that we end up paying, because a lot of our bill is based on what the one coincident peak is for transmission on AEP and the average of 5 coincident peaks in the PJM regional transmission operator area. So I asked AMP to run some scenarios for us. We assumed that in any case that the solar field would be the same, but we asked them to take a look at the 2018 to 2022 power supply cost projections with different scenarios of operation of the generation. And we wanted to do this to give you a kind of an idea of what an impact that makes and why what having that local generation means to our community. So the assumptions that we were using in that prior slide here included us only hitting 66% success rate with hitting those peaks and reducing them. So they also took a look at doing 100%, which is where we're on track for this year. And also I asked them to run a scenario that if we didn't run any generation at all, what the impact would be on these power supply costs. So this is what was in the scenario that you saw before. The exception, if you remember, this was 74, and this was 74, and these two were 76. Capacity costs have decreased slightly since the original chart was prepared earlier this year. So those impacts are reflected in this chart here. So not a lot of difference from what you saw prior, but there is some positive impact. This is if we do hit 100% of the peaks with everything that we've got. And you can see that over the next 4 or 5 years, we would be paying less than 7 cents per kilowatt hour. That's a significant difference when you look at about 200 million kilowatt hours per year delivered to our system. Yes, Jim?
Can I ask you back up just a little bit?
Mhm.
When you were talking about the peak shaving impacts, what effect would it have if you were to take the solar field out of that scenario?
Well, it would be 1 megawatt of that equivalent there. So I don't remember.
But it could be offset by,
Well, you would pay more for
Right.
transmission and capacity cost as a result of that. Yeah. And it's probably on the $50,000 to $75,000 per megawatt kind of basis. It's not insignificant.
right,
Okay. And so, again, here it is, if we hit 100% of it, if you didn't generate at all, then these are the numbers you're looking at. So you can see we're approaching 9 cents a kilowatt hour.
Could the
there.
loss from the solar field be made up in other places?
Yes,
Could be.
absolutely.
All right. I guess that.
But there's no downside to doing more.
Right.
That's the important
Yeah,
thing,
I
is that so far on the transmission 1 coincident peak, our tie line was actually operating at a negative 4 megawatts. So we were actually pushing 4 megawatts back out onto the grid during that time. And we get grouped in with the other AEP communities that are part of the OMEG group. So we do get credit for that, even if we run negative. So getting to 0 is not the bottom. So some of the things that we talked about, kind of to answer your question, Jim, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, you know, the Nordberg diesel, we used to use it for peak shaving. Changes occurred to the Rice knee shaft rule, they called it, on reciprocating engines. But we believe we're going to get someone in here to evaluate them. Matt's already contacted them. We believe that there'd be a very short payback for us to install the emissions control equipment at the plant on the Nordberg to be able to allow it to peak shave again. And that's a 2.5 megawatt unit.
And that take all limits off the Nordberg then? As far
I'm
as,
sorry.
that would take all the operating limits off of the Nordberg. I mean, as far as how many hours you could operate it.
It would give you more hours. We really only need probably 120 to 200 hours a year is about the average. So, you know, we wouldn't need unlimited hours on it.
Okay.
But it would have some sort of limits on the
But there would
total
still be some
amount of,
limitations, okay.
of emissions on an annual basis. But we would be able to use it for peak shaving. Right now, we can only use it for emergency purposes.
Yeah.
And it does provide emergency backup for the water treatment plant as well. Okay. I mentioned also that the water treatment plant folks have been, on the same days that we run generation, the same hours, have been interrupting the wells and the aerator and the high service pumps over there to take 300 or 400 kilowatts of load off of the system. And that's just as good as starting up a 300 or 400 kilowatt generator. So they've adjusted their operation, making sure that all of the water storage is filled before the hours occur, and then they coast through that period, utilizing the storage that we have available, and then start back up after the peak is passed. So that is another one of those things when you're asking, are there other ways to offset it? Yes, you know, we this year also sent out voluntary peak alerts, asking people to conserve between the hours of 2 and 6 on those days. And if people wonder if it makes a difference, it does make a difference. And so we would want to try to work, you know, with the other city departments, see if there are things that we can do. We've discussed whether or not, like at City Hall, how much of an impact would it be if you could raise the temperature from 2 to 6, or turn off some lights, or at the wastewater plant or other locations like that. Anything that we can do to work together will help. And we got out of AMP's demand response program because we quit getting credit from PJM for it. But taking a look at how we are billed for that, we could create our own program and offer similar financial incentives to customers that are able to interrupt load when we're called upon to generate, and do the same thing, accomplish it, but it'd be an internal program rather than one through AMP. So those are all ways that we could look at offsetting that difference, increasing it. And at least as far as I know, you know, we couldn't do enough of it that we'd ever be limited out on it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So a couple of other things that we talked about last time was the AMP hydroelectric project refinancing opportunity in 2019. That's approximately 10% of our total energy requirements. So if we can do something to reduce the cost of that through refinancing, that would have a positive impact. I mentioned the Morgan Stanley contract. This was entered into as AMP-GS project replacement power. So the cost of power was higher at that time. That contract expires in 2020. We pay almost $63 a megawatt hour for that power. That will be replaced by $36.75 per megawatt hour BP remaining requirements contract. That's approximately $524,000 a year savings beginning in 2020, or at the end of 2020, I'm sorry. And then we've got another item on the agenda tonight to evaluate the water resource at the Auglaize hydroelectric plant, see whether or not additional capacity and energy could be produced there by taking a look at putting units that are designed for the specific site conditions there at the plant, and see what the feasibility, economic feasibility of that would be if it shows that capacity and energy is available that we're not making use of today. So as far as next steps, we would recommend in the resolution that you have before you for your consideration is to adopt the year one rates of the 3-year plan at this time, review the results, you know, and come back next year and with a recommendation either to implement the year 2, or if operating results show we ought to do something different, then you'll have an opportunity to make that change at that time, and we're not locked into the 3 years of the program. If you approve those rates tonight, then they would become effective with bills rendered on and after September 20th. There's also included in with the new rates a request to modify the power supply cost adjustment language to a forward-looking calculation. Right now we have a retro-looking calculation that looks at the last 3 months, takes a look at what those costs are, and that's a pretty short time frame, especially as you go through changes in the summer months when costs are higher. We're generating to save money all year long, but we're paying for the gas in 3 months. So there's big bills then that get in there, and that increases the volatility or the changes in the power supply cost adjustment. So by looking forward and seeing what the power supply costs are projected to be, knowing how successful or unsuccessful we are with the peak shaving this year will help determine what those costs are for next year. So we'll have a pretty good idea. And if we need to make changes in the PSCA, we can do it more gradually over a longer period of time, because the concept here with the PSCA is that you don't make any money on that. You collect dollar for dollar what your costs are. So we're going to want to try to keep that zeroed out as much as possible. But the current PSCA language includes no reconciliation function. So if you over-collected or under-collected, you never have the opportunity to go and get that money back or to refund it to the customers if you over-collected. So this helps ensure that we try to keep an accurate record of that going forward, and we don't collect any more or any less than what we need in the PSCA. The current formula also includes distribution system losses of 10%, which exceed what our actual distribution system losses are. So we're also over-recovering or recovering more than we need to cover those distribution system losses. So we want to more accurately reflect those, and we would recommend that you establish the PSCA initially with the new rates at 0. So what would be the next step? I mentioned that we're planning a meeting hosted by the Chamber of Commerce for the first week in October. We'll invite all the key accounts top users in the electrical users in the city, go over the rate changes, talk about other things that they can do to save money on their bills, and start that kind of dialogue with everybody. We'll be glad to follow up with each one of those customers afterwards and give them some sample bills showing past consumption with the new rates applied so they can see what the impacts are on them. And then, of course, going through our usual channels of social media, media releases, and customer bill inserts to talk about the changes. And with that, if there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
I like how it's evolved over time from when this conversation first started into what it is now, which I think is going to be really good for everyone. I don't see any hiccups in this. I don't see anything that could phase anybody with hardship.
Well, I think it helps us from an economic development standpoint, first of all, and as a launching pad for other economic development efforts. Part of what we needed to do here was get the structure of it straightened out more, where it more accurately reflects our cost, because then we've got some options that we can share with customers, that either existing customers that are expanding their consumption or new customers to the community. I think there are things you can do with both groups. And sometimes I think existing customers feel like they get left out in the cold as far as some of those incentives go. But I think we can work with anybody that's looking at expanding their electric usage and come up with some pricing that would be more favorable for that additional load. Yes, Bill?
I guess I'm intrigued by the reconciliation to ensure accurate power cost recovery. So would that effectively mean if it's reconciled and we recovered more than what we needed to, that we could then have a negative PSCA? Was that possible?
Yeah, how it would work is that you would do the calculation of, we know what the power supply cost is that's included in the base rates. If there's a PSCA, then we would also add that. We'd multiply that by the number of kilowatt hours that were sold, and then we'd compare what was collected to what the cost was. If it's more than what the cost was, we would in the next month put a credit equal to that amount of over collection in the calculation. If it was under recovered, then we would add an adder to it.
And as you kind of explained before, we didn't have that flexibility. We couldn't do the reconciliation.
That's correct.
It wasn't part of the language.
That's correct. It was not included in the language. And a good example is, just by the nature of how the billings arrive and how our bills go out. If we get a bill from AMP, it's for the month prior. So let's say it was for July. So we're going to do the calculation, but it won't get applied to bills until going out, the 20th of August and through 20th of September. Well, the usage in August is much higher than it is in September typically. So if you use that number, you're going to apply it to a lot fewer kilowatt hours, so you will not recover all of the costs. And conversely, if you're going into the summer, the same thing can happen. You'll have lower costs, you'll apply that to the summer usage, but you may or may not recover the correct amount. And because it has no reconciliation function, then you can't go back by the way it's set up now and say we recovered too much or too little. If you lost it, then it's gone forever. If you over collected it, then it never goes back to the customers. And that's not how those things are designed to work.
Thanks.
So what then, do you just, like at the end of the first year, when you review this, you adjust for that?
No, we would do it every month.
Every month?
We do the calculation now every month. The difference is that we're only looking back at the last 3 months instead of over a longer period of time to try to keep it more consistent. And then there's no reconciliation function in the current formula. So it just is whatever it is every month, and then we move on to the next month. So, if there are changes in your power supply, like we know that the third unit of Smithland is coming online, well, we can look ahead and know that that's coming, and we could include that in our projections of what the power supply cost will be.
But this is fundamental, we're looking forward as opposed to looking backward.
Correct.
And the old
Correct.
calculation was 3 months back. Now we're gonna be
Correct.
looking forward so we can allow for those adjustments we know are coming in.
Absolutely. And then you're not waiting, conversely, if we're very successful and we're able to reduce these costs, then you can look ahead, because we know when we're at the end of this peaking season with reasonable certainty that from January until December of next year, we're gonna see that difference in the capacity cost. And then from just June through May of the following year, what the capacity cost is gonna be. So we wouldn't have to wait until we see those. We could start reducing the PSCA already, knowing that that's what was gonna happen.
So we apply this projected what it is, then we compare it to actual.
That's right.
That's how you get the reconciliation.
Right.
That's right.
That's,
And I think that
Lot
for
better.
folks, and sometimes people joke everyone's on a fixed income, but it's really kind of true, right? If you're a business or you're a resident or, retired or working, you only have so much income. And if you have big swings in that cost because of the PSCA changes, and our customers have unfortunately seen a lot of that over the last year, then it's tough to budget for that.
Right. And this reduces the volatility of it.
Absolutely. It will be more consistent for
More
folks.
consistent.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
And I think that's an advantage.
Yeah.
And then again, we're not collecting any more or any less than we need to. We'll keep track of it and bill it out dollar for dollar how it comes. Now, it will never be at exactly zero, but it'll always be a little, but the idea here is we keep it as close to zero as we can. Does that answer your questions?
Yes.
But then I think it gives credibility to your published electric rates, because
Yeah.
your published rate can be this, but now we gotta put the PSCA, and that's kind of the.
Right.
Kind of the thing that makes it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and
this will make that
Yeah.
ESCA go away potentially.
Yeah, it will
Minimize.
reset to zero to begin with. I'm hopeful that it'll be a negative PSCA in the future if we are successful at doing what we're trying to do here.
There's been a lot to it. Thanks for the hard work. I know you and I have been, it's crazy.
Well-
It's a wild, how things work. Thank God you're smarter than I am about that stuff.
Well, it's one of those things, I kind of got in here near the tail end of it, and they had done a lot of the work, but it just didn't all jive with me, and so we had to sort of break it down again and start over with some of the power supply piece, which is about 3/4 of your total bill. So it's important that we get that right. And it wasn't particularly anybody's fault. The information that they got from AMP didn't properly split out the demand costs, the debt service costs, and the energy costs. So when they were looking at some of that in that first one-year plan that they gave you, they were putting average costs in there instead of properly allocating it between demand and energy. And what the result was, if you applied that, as people used power more efficiently, their cost actually increased.
Yeah, it looked like they went up.
Because it was going more into the energy cost instead of the demand cost.
And that's wrong.
And so it took a little longer, and I apologize for the delay with that. But at the end of the day, I think it's much more important that we get this right than we get it fast.
Right.
And I think we're on the right track here with it.
You made it pretty clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Every time you go over, just we learn something new. And
Yeah, it gets a little more
Right.
easier to wrap your head around.
Right. Good job.
Thanks, Kevin.
One more question, Kevin, is
Yeah.
just a timing question. So this is year one of a 3-year projected, and you're gonna,
Correct.
so would the anniversary be August 2018? You would
That's
look at this
correct.
again and then
That's correct.
adjust, and whether
Yes.
you're gonna go into phase 2, whatever that
Yep.
may look like, and redo the numbers.
Correct. Correct. We will be looking at it, of course, before that time to see how things shook out there, Bill, and then have a recommendation ready for you by the anniversary date.
I'm gonna move move on resolution 17.
Second.
Bill?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Next on the agenda will be a resolution to authorize an amendment to the Omega JV2 lease agreement. And this will be resolution number 80.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we have an agreement. There are 6 diesel units out there on Evansport Road that are under an existing lease agreement from 1999. AMP has taken a look at being able to extend the term of JV2 by doing some capital improvements. They've done some of them on the diesels to put in the oxidation catalyst to allow them to continue to operate as peaking units, the same thing that we're looking at for the Nordberg, and also some work on some combustion turbines. So before they spend all of this capital money, they'd like to know that they are still going to have a lease period if they make the capital improvements to be able to operate these units. And so for the diesels, of which we have here, they're asking for an extension of that lease term through December 31st of 2023. And I've taken a look through the proposed amendment. I don't have any issues with it. And Ron has also taken a look at it, city attorney.
And again, the benefit of that being also if we would ever lose our 138 from AEP, we could always use these as emergency.
That's correct.
We have that option, so.
That's correct.
Do we get a check for the lease each month, or do we get a credit?
We are not actually part of the JV2 project because we had quite a bit of generation here to begin with, Bill. So, you know, we have leased this parcel to them. The benefit we get is that, as Dick mentioned, we have that ability, if we have an emergency, to have access to additional generation. Those are 1.8 megawatt diesels, and we have 6 of them. So it's not immaterial for us there in the event of an emergency.
It's a good trade-off, security trade-off.
Yeah, it's an additional insurance.
So moved. 19.
Have we ever used them for our own backup purposes?
Not to my knowledge, unless, Matt, if you are aware of that. So, but we certainly could if we
Good.
were in that situation.
So it's just a 4-year extension then?
That's correct. And all other terms of the lease remain unchanged.
What would we have done if we wouldn't have come with this extension?
Then
What would have
the
happened?
agreement is that they will remove those diesels at the end of the term and restore the site.
And that would still happen in 2023?
Potentially. They
With
would
no
hope to
change.
be able to get beyond that, but with some of the changes in environmental regulation, they're not sure with the diesel units, whether the life can be extended beyond that. If they can, then I think AMP would be very interested in continuing to have them here. Now, what they have done with some of if this is the question that you're leading to, in some of the areas where they have not been able to retrofit those units, they've offered them for sale to the local community as emergency backup units. But in this case, they have improved them, or they're compliant with the emissions regulations, so they can continue to operate.
Good. Yeah.
And again, the trade-off being, if we was to ever lose our 138, tornado rip through, blah, 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 between the generation that we already have, that's 8 more megawatts. We could generate all the electricity for the whole town. So it's a good security thing. And it's out by the sewage treatment plant. There's nothing that they're taking away from us, from the city of Bryan. So. Yeah.
Yep.
Just irritate the geese when they start.
That's a good thing.
That's true.
Start them up.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
A second.
Excuse me, Bill already made a motion. to
Oh, I'm
approve.
sorry, Bill. In that case, I'll second.
Bill,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Next on the agenda is a resolution authorizing agreement for an AMI feasibility study. Kevin, if you would.
We have taken a couple of looks at automated metering infrastructure, which is what AMI stands for in the past. And in one case, it was a vendor-supplied proposal and evaluation. In the other case, we've been following what AMP has been doing, and they have already selected a vendor. And for us, I think that it would be useful to have an independent evaluation of the costs and benefits of such a system and what that could mean to us as far as taking a look at customer service enhancements as well as cost savings and other benefits. So Value Tech, the firm that you have the proposal from, they do not sell AMI systems. They do this kind of work with evaluating what our current meter reading systems are, how we do business, whether that's collecting readings for move-ins, move-outs, final bills, as well as theft and tamper detection, leaks, and how timely we can respond to issues like that. If we're able to get daily reads, there's no need, for example, if someone's moving out of the apartment to send someone out there to get a reading, we'll already have the reading. Or if someone wants to discontinue an account, instead of dispatching someone, if we were going to physically disconnect the account, you could do what's called a soft disconnect and take a look and see if power consumption continues after the date that they said they were going to cease service. And if so, then you can bill them for that, and you certainly then could follow up with a hard disconnect. But most of the time, if people tell you they're going to be out, they're going to be out. So it's just some of those kinds of things. We still do estimated bills. If we can't get access to meters, now you will have a reading again every day. And so it would eliminate some of those estimated reads and the disputes sometimes that can accompany those types of situations. And customers can be able to access that kind of information as well. So I think that there's a lot of potential value, but I think, again, it's worth taking a look at what all the potential costs are and the potential benefits from someone that doesn't have an interest in trying to sell us a system.
It's a small price to pay for the investment that we will have to make.
Well,
It's a small price.
and that's part of the evaluation too, is taking a look at our current electric and water meters, seeing what can be retrofitted if possible rather than replaced. And if you can do that, then you can do that at a cost savings. So that would reduce the overall project cost as well. But all of that stuff, if you had an opportunity to take a look at any of the materials that were provided there, I think there's a lot of different facets to this that maybe you wouldn't think about, just taking a look at it. And if it shows that it would be worth our while to proceed, then we would put a specification together for what we want rather than what some manufacturer is trying to sell us on. And I think that would, again, best serve the customer needs here and our needs as well. So it's $34,680 estimated cost. We'd split that 75% between electric and 25% to water. We do have AMI dollars in the budget this year, of course not knowing where we were going with it at the time that the budget was prepared, but I think this would be a good preliminary step because you certainly could spend several $1 million on a system like this. So this, I think, would be providing information that would help you make an informed decision on whether it's a good thing or not to proceed.
In general terms, how many water meters do we have and how many electric meters do we have in the system?
Well,
Right at 3,900 water, give or take a little, 3,900 water meters.
approximately 10,000 electric meters, is that right?
About 6.
Oh, is it 6?
6,000.
Okay.
Average cost of a meter?
$100.
How about your water meters, Norm?
Well, it just kind of depends.
Well,
I mean, to start from scratch with
Yeah.
a brand new meter setting and everything, with the transmitter on it, we're probably in the $240, $250 range. It's a little more expensive than electric meters.
what percent or what number do you shoot for every year to replace, to get rid of your old, slow running
Well,
water meters?
Here lately, we're kind of just sitting back with a wait and see approach.
Okay, I guess what I'm building up to is that I guess if we're gonna have to replace them anyway, we might as well. The information you gave from was the city of Hamilton, I think it was, and they were talking, going like 30%, 60%, whatever, of the replacement. And they mentioned, and I mean, it was a fair percentage of an increase in revenue that you could expect just from replacing the meters from the, well, you know way more about it than I do,
Yeah.
but the percentage of loss from,
Well, they tend to slow down as
Right.
they age, the old mechanical ones.
and I guess if you're gonna replace them anyway,
Well, I think, what are you at, a 15 or 20-year replacement cycle?
Well, yeah,
Well,
that's 20 years is what the rule of thumb is that we used to try to shoot for, yes.
And in Hamilton's case, they had done a drive-by system where
Mhm.
you have a van that drives all over town and
Right.
collects those readings once a month. They did their change to that system in 2005, 2006, and I think they had 10,000 meters or something at that time that were less than 15 years old that they didn't replace. So now it's 10 years further on, and so that's why they were
Yeah.
taking a look at that. And we would certainly look at this as well, but if we can retrofit the meter rather than replacing it, then that would be less expensive than the price there that Norm was talking about.
Right.
But I think that he raises a valid point. I think both Al and Norm are trying to struggle with, do we move forward with purchasing new meters, not knowing where we're at with this evaluation? And some of the handhelds that we enter this data into, my understanding, are reaching the end of their useful lives, and we're going to have to come up with something that takes the place of those. So it's another reason I think that it's timely to take a look at all of those different things and then try to come up with a plan one way or another going forward.
And I know that technology has changed so much, it's changing all the time. I know when we first discussed AMI, they had software interface problems
Yeah,
to get that information to the clerk treasurer.
right.
Now I think that's getting better.
It is, and all of those systems used to be more proprietary. So if you bought a particular meter reading software, there were very few meter options that you could use. But now they are more universal, more open in their architecture. So a lot of them will read multiple meters. So that may help us reduce the number of meters on the electric side and the water side that we would have to replace. And of course, we do use the water meter readings to bill wastewater on. And so if there's some increase that we can make with more accurate readings, then it also benefits the wastewater utility.
is there projected life on the batteries on those?
Well, that has also improved, the battery life over the last 10 years.
Because that'd probably be
or so.
something you'd want to deal with proactively, because you wouldn't, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
they go dead, they don't register, you
And
don't.
you saw that that was becoming a problem there in the
Mhm.
Hamilton
Yeah.
system. And a lot of those meters, again, were probably 12 years old or so, 10 to 12 years years old, and they were starting to see failures because of the battery dying. Now they are estimating the life of those batteries at 20 years versus the 10 years. So the technology has improved. And many of these systems, to help improve that battery life, also, the meter battery isn't active all 24 hours. A signal goes out to read the meter, it sort of wakes the meter up, it sends the reading, and then it goes back to sleep. So it conserves the battery life that way.
I assume then that the battery issue would only be a consideration for the water meters. The electric meters would be self-powering?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah. And the way that many of these systems work is it's a short radio hop from the water meter to the electric meter, and then all of that comes back either by power line carrier or by a wireless receiver.
How long has Value Tech Solutions been in business?
Well, more than 10 years. I've worked with them since about 2004. And I worked with them in Wyandotte, Michigan, and Bowling Green and Hamilton on doing similar feasibility studies. And I thought that their price was very reasonable, and they did a great job. The principal, Ed Finnemore, there comes from the utility business. He worked for, I think, Duquesne Light and Power. So he's got a utility background, and he's also very strong on the IT and billing system end. So he's very helpful with trying to resolve any of those kinds of issues as well.
Has AMP used them?
I don't think that AMP has, but Westerville has used them, Wadsworth has used them, a number of other Ohio municipal utilities have used them.
So they've got a fairly good reputation
Yes.
then that comes with them, and good references, and
I like the idea they don't stand to profit from this other than the fee for the study.
Right.
I know we've talked about this ever since I've been on the board. I think now's a good time that we do something, so
Yeah.
I'd be in favor of getting this thing started.
Is that a motion?
I will move that we accept resolution number 19.
I'll second.
Tom?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Rich? Karen?
yes.
Bill?
Michael, this is resolution 19. Next will be a resolution to authorize an agreement for All Glaze hydroelectric plant evaluation.
Thank you. You have a resolution and a proposal for your consideration from Stantec. This would be to assess capacity and energy generation potential at the Auglaize hydroelectric plant, assuming installation of modern equipment designed for specific site conditions. What Stantec will be doing is reviewing the headwater and tailwater level history information for the last 10 years there, taking a look at the daily river flow and the FERC license exemption requirements, using 10 years of that hydroelectric data plugged into a computer model to estimate what the potential is there if you assume that you're using modern units, what more we could get as far as capacity and energy. It is believed that we can get more out of the asset than what we're currently getting out of it. And if it looks favorable in that regard, then you would move to a cost-benefit analysis of looking at replacing some of the turbines and generators over some period of time based on what the economics of that would be. And this is a not-to-exceed cost of $26,000.
I'm looking at what Auglaize is producing so far this year, And if the water stopped today, we'd still have the third best year out of the last 6. So we're on, I would say, Matt, we're probably gonna have a banner year. It'd be interesting to see from this feasibility study just what that could be.
Correct.
And that's primarily what we're doing. If we are only capable now with the equipment that we have, which some of it's 90 years old, if we're only getting 4 megawatts, maybe we could be getting 8 with something more modern. And that's what we'd like to find out.
Right. Because the board may recall, none of those units are the original units at the Auglaize with the exception of the turbine in 6, correct?
And it's all,
not-
they're all different.
Okay, I thought that one was the only original unit. So these units were constructed, designed for other locations with different head and flow characteristics. We've modified them to work in this location. Some of those units date to the 1920s. And the good news of that is if you end up replacing them, then you should expect that kind of life out of the new units as well. But if we're not getting the efficiency that we could be getting, and in that, I mean, taking the same river flow and getting more energy or more capacity out of it, when you look at the life of those units, even small changes year by year over 50 to 75 years add up to very large changes. And my intuition here is that we can do better than what we're doing, but the only way to know is to do the engineering calculations here. And I think that for $26,000, it's probably a pretty good investment. We've talked about power supply costs today, and the value that the Auglaize brings in part is it's, from an electrical standpoint, treated as if it were located in the city of Bryan. It's behind the meter generation for purposes of capacity and transmission costs. So this year, Matt and his staff on our one coincident transmission peak were able to operate the Auglaize because of the water that we had at over 3 megawatts, correct?
Right.
So, you know, that'll save significant dollars next year if that ends up being the one coincident peak for 2017. And we're entering the 3rd week of August, so, you know, we're hopeful that we've seen the one coincident peak. But if not, then we'll do the best we can with the water that we have those days as well. But next year, then hopefully we'll have the Nordberg available too, if that's not available. And we'll continue some of the other efforts to reduce capacity. But with the hydro, of course, there is no fuel cost. You don't burn coal, you don't burn natural gas. So all you have really is the capital cost there. And if you can take a look at that over the life of that unit, if we're able to get more out of it, it will benefit the community for many, many years.
I got a question for Matt. This would be for you. I'm reading, I don't know, paragraph 1, 2, 3, probably 5 or 6 on that. Shall perform the following services. The Stantec assumes that 5 of the 6 units have equally sized and unit bays and waterways. Details regarding the size of water passage and the powerhouse layout will not be considered in detail at this time. So, is there one of the waterways it's smaller than the others?
Unit 6 is a small unit.
Okay.
It's half the size of the other 5 bays. So, yeah, it's half the size.
So
And
that's
I
what-
think they're gonna look at some possible reconstruction of the bays.
Yeah, what they wanted to make sure we understood is at this level of it, Bill, they weren't gonna get into that kind of detail.
Detail. So that's an
Because in an
assumption.
earlier version, they said, well, we assume that there wouldn't be different sized units. And I said, well, we would not make that assumption. If different sized units would match up with the river flow conditions better, then why wouldn't we consider that? And so they left that in there just as a clarifier that they're not gonna get into that level of detail as part of this.
Unless-
Which, yeah, unless it appears that there would be some benefit to going to a cost benefit analysis of actually replacing those units. And talking with Matt as well, we've got a couple of those units that in the near term here, probably within the next 3 to 5 years, we're looking at rewinding 2 of those generators. So again, maybe it's an opportune time to take a look at this rather than rewinding some of those old units. It may be more beneficial to just take a look at replacing them with newer units. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing either, based on the results. Maybe only 1 or 2 of them should be replaced. We won't know until we see the data.
I think it's really curious because, Matt, you might be validated and you say, hey, you know, you're really doing a great job maximizing the potential that's there with what you cobbled together.
That's a scary thing.
Yeah, that could possibly, it could be the case, or we could generate a lot more. So either side, we win. Either way, we win.
Well, like Kevin said, those units came from other plants. They were designed for different heads. We don't operate them under their optimal conditions because we don't have that. They weren't designed for that. So we run them the best we can for what we have.
But when I've talked to you, you said, well, you know, we got this too much head here, we got too much water here, it works best, it's right about this, and the river flow, and you know it by the seat, not the seat of your pants, but you've looked at the data, and I know that you've tried to pool water, so in fact, hey, you can run when it needs to be run. So I think you need to be confident in what you've done, so I think this is a great idea to do this study.
Well, if we're able to do that too, it also helps with additional renewable energy in the portfolio and maximizing the asset that people have paid for here already. The big cost is in the infrastructure of the powerhouse and the dam. The turbines and generators are a much smaller part of that cost.
I know you've had difficulty getting them certified for RECs. If you invested the money, then they all should be able to be certified for RECs because they're new.
Well, and we got that legislative change so that we will be able to get all of them certified effective September 29th. So we were on top of that too to try to get that additional revenue.
Part of that.
Yeah.
Got a record year, Matt. Keep rain dancing.
It's slow right now, though. So
Yeah, I know.
Pretty dry.
This resolution 20, so moved.
Second.
Bill,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Next on the agenda will be a request to reclassify 2 power plant operators.
Well, both Mr. Killian and Ms. Perry are here if you have any questions regarding the reclassification. These are for Jay Ziegler and A.J. Guerin, and for Jay, we're looking at reclassifying him from Power Plant Operator 3 to Probationary Power Plant Operator 4. You can see in there some of the technical training that he has passed, and some of the other positive comments from Mr. Killian. For AJ, reclassifying him from Power Plant Operator 3 also to Probationary Power Plant Operator 4. He's completed the Substation Technician Certification Program through the Northwest Lineman's College.
Well, I think they've both done a great job over the years.
Yeah, both employees are exemplary. They can run all their equipment. They've completed their required training. They can operate all blades. They've, altered their vacation schedules to help us peak shave. I mean, they're always there when we need them. And that's great to work with people like that who think about the community and care about the community and always want to do the right thing. So that they recommend that you authorize them to operate a corporation.
I would like to make that motion.
Second.
Karen,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Jim.
Matt, we gonna get much rain tomorrow?
I don't know. It's pretty quick. Pretty dry now, so it's all gonna be absorbed if it does. With all the corn in the fields, that gets sucked up pretty quick. This time of year, we usually don't get much runoff.
Next on the agenda, pay bills.
I move we pay the bills.
Second. Bill?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Dick?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Next on the agenda will be comments from BPA and staff. Mr. Salisbury.
You always pick me first. I guess.
I respect my elders.
Yeah, right. We'll talk about that later. No, I think we had some good discussion, and I think the AMI, I think it's time we looked into that, and it sounds like the time's right for that. The outlays, I guess, I had never really thought about that. I mean, it was just always there, and it always ran, and it rains, and it's a good thing, but I guess it never dawned on me that place could be made more efficient, so I think that's what we're looking at. So I think we've dealt with some good projects tonight. That's all I got.
Tom? Mr. Pavlo?
Yeah, I'm pleased that we've gotten the rate thing kind of set, and I like that. There's been lots of conversation in the community about that. What are we gonna do? What are you gonna do? So I think we've got a good plan going forward, and I like it. I like the fact that we can reconcile potentially the power supply cost adjustments, and it's forward-looking, not retroactive, or not looking back. I like all that part of it. And that has always been, wasn't necessarily the rate, it was that power supply cost adjustment thing that really drove people crazy. That part's been fixed, so I'm real pleased about that. I like the idea of doing the AMI studies like Jim talked about, and also a feasibility study for potentially maximizing what goes by the river or at the dam, because there's no fuel cost in it. I think it also helps when we've done all this analyzation of power costs and power supply costs, and the meeting that we had with Mike did a really good job, and you see the value of being able to hit those coincidental peaks and the things that happen with out there, and how important that is to the customers, those 1 or 2 times or 5 times that those things happen, be able to generate and have the capacity to generate what the value it is to the citizens and the ratepayers in the community. And those things are kind of behind the scenes, and they really don't talk about it much, but you who are in the utility know how important that is, because it affects the bills that go out and the rates that we're going to have for the next year. So those are really important. So any of those assets like the Nordberg, which is really 1940s vintage, it looks like a German U-2 boat in a power plant, but that is an asset that can generate, and help save rates, and the dam can do the same, and the solar can do the same, and there's no transmission costs, it's behind the meter, and all those things just save money, and when they're put together, stacked up, it really does a nice job of helping us with our rates. So really good conversation and education, I think, for us as BPA members about how all that works, and it's really important. So excited about it. That'd be it. I ran it enough.
Well, I'm in agreement with what you guys say. This information that is going to be presented to us over time, over the near future, is like almost starting from scratch. We know where we're at. We'll get confirmation for things that we've done right, and it'll give us direction where to head in the future. It's all good information, so we know what to do next, and we'll have good, solid information, reasons why behind all the work that we continue to do. So it's good to get back to business. As usual, we've had a long time off. And yeah, I like the peak shaving idea, like the water treatment plant shutting down during peak hours. It's a really good effort to try, and everybody else, it's good to try those type of things. So I'm real happy to hear about that kind of stuff happening.
And Norm and Derek have been terrific to work with on that. They, in short order, adjusted their schedule, operating schedule over there, and worked with us. And we said, look, if this doesn't work, you just got to let us know. But they made it work, and they've made it work every one of those days that AMPS called for peak shaving. So.
And it helps. Like you said, we're not burning fuel, we're just,
That's
just
right.
reducing.
That's right. Taking advantage of the storage that we have here.
Another good example of teamwork throughout the whole organization, looking at the big picture and taking care of the whole city.
That's it.
Okay. Thanks again, Kevin, for your hard work on that. I call it the rate stabilization plan. Because there's just been a lot to it. Thank God you're here. I know when past director left, I kind of got that dumped into my lap, and I was like, if I'd had hair, I'd pulled it out. I wasn't quite sure what to do. So I appreciate all the work you've done. We're all forward thinking. I like that. We're all looking way down the road, so that's a good thing. Last EM conference in August, if anyone's interested in going, 25th through the 28th, I believe. Just
September.
September. I'll tell you what, this summer's just like,
It's September, you're all right.
okay. When so be, I would say.
Yep.
So Kevin.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I think that these issues that we're talking about are not simple issues. And, it's not perhaps the easiest decisions to make. But I do believe that these things will yield some very valuable information one way or another, as far as whether it makes sense to move in a direction with AMI and with the Oglays. Even the power supply costs here, appreciate your patience as we tried to work our way through that. We had hoped to have that finished up for you sooner, but there were things that we had to modify in there to get it to where it's going today. So I do appreciate very much your consideration on these things. That's all I have.
Mayor?
Okay, council did not meet last night. The next meeting for council will be August 21st, and then the meeting after that will be on Tuesday, September 5th, due to the fact that Labor Day is September 4th. I told you in July would be back with Labor Day, and here it is, September 4th, and garbage is picked up as usual on that day, but council and offices will be closed. This coming Saturday at Walgreens, August 19th, from 10 to 1, they're having the law enforcement, their officers, police, K-9 units, firefighters, EMS, EMA, the safe communities, and the Ohio State Patrol will announce drive sober or get pulled over, kicked off at 10 o'clock. So it's kind of a celebration they have each year, and a safety day at Walgreens 10 to 1 on this coming Saturday. And then what's going on in the town, we're moving forward with the wastewater project. Weather is a great issue, and when the cold comes, that's really going to affect us here. They're working on all the first digester. I don't know if they're going to get through all of the 3 digesters by when the cold hits, but they're moving. And of course, EPA is out there. We have to follow certain regulations with EPA to keep that going, and that's coming on fine. The fire training replacement range out there, that building has been torn down, and the bricks are there. They're starting to lay cement block tomorrow on that. Turn lane at Central Town Line started today. If everything goes right by the end of the week, that will be done. It's a quick and paid, but if it rains, it'll be Monday or Tuesday, so we'll get school started on time. That's a 4-way stop. They're taking the light down out there. That's a 4-way stop, so we caution people to drive out there to be careful because it's not the usual light. People coming from the east to the west and so forth. And then as it gets a little into the season, Gherkin will be in here paving certain streets, and then Zimmerman follows up with striping. The South Street project up at Circle K started that this week. The water department's out there working now. The traffic is a big thing, but they're handling that, and we hope to have that done. The gas station grant was approved by the state controlling board. Now it goes back to the commissioners, I guess, and that to bid it out to tear it down. I don't know how long this is going to take. It's been an everlasting project, but it was approved.
This is the Clark Station.
Clark
The old Clark
Wow.
Station.
Clark Station.
Hallelujah.
We are working on it.
Yeah, we're working.
Make sure everybody heard that. They are.
The soccer lights, as you know, we're moving forward with that. We it'll be ordered from Musco and so forth, so that's exciting. We hope to get that moving faster, sooner rather than later, and get something going there. We heard from Bryan at the US 127, the North Main, South Main, we were funded for 95% of that for 2018. So that will be $1,219,000 funded for that, so we can come up with the rest. And also East-South Street is on target to go from the Circle K or where they end up clear to the end. Now that's just a curb and gutter and things of that sort. Not sidewalk, but the project to go from one end to the other is hopefully moving forward in 2018. It's on the public work radar, so we're right up here.
Could save a ton of money with it.
Yes, yeah. So there's a lot of things happening that's happening right now, so we're happy with that.
Well, Mayor, what will that Clark station, will that just become green space or?
No,
how will that end up?
What is it?
Land bank.
Land bank will own that,
Okay.
and then they can sell that, the way I understand, and they'd like to recoup the taxes that they can get out of that, but then once they get that, the money stays in the, I guess, land bank. It's
But
gonna-
once the tanks are out and the building's torn down,
Anyone can,
they just,
Yeah,
They can
that'll
sell
be
it.
done by grant,
Yeah.
and then they can put it up for auction.
good.
so,
I assume that's zone commercial, I mean,
yeah.
C1 or something.
So whether the house to the south would buy that, I don't know, or whether they'll sell the whole business, you know, and then the banks will pass that, so you don't know what's gonna happen there, so.
Mayor, I got a
Good.
question for you.
Yes,
When they get the work done on South Street and Main Street, are we ever gonna be able to turn right on red?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
That'd be an improvement.
Yeah, well, there's some reasons why you can't, but talk to the engineer.
Okay. I'm sure.
Some people do turn that right, but anyhow,
Yeah.
and that's our collection, we can collect on that.
We got a couple of council members, you can ask.
I do not ever turn right on red. Not.
I can tell you that issue has been raised many times, and many times it has been determined to leave the sign.
Some turn there right on red anyhow.
Yeah.
Or cut through the bank.
Okay, I'm guilty.
They get picked up, they get some other. Big shade.
Yes.
That's right.
That's all.
Okay, thanks for your comments.
No, sir.
Laura,
No, sir.
department heads, council, Max.
Thanks, man.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Bill?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Tom?
Yes.